From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Lawmakers in Colombia's Congress managed to block a reform that would have allowed the government to arrest former FARC combatants. The right-wing party Centro Democrático proposed this law on the grounds of alleged security and public interest. The FARC party and other supporters of the peace agreement rejected it. The UN has repeatedly called for legal guarantees to protect the lives of the FARC members and respect the peace deal.
We did not expect them to try to put these new articles there at such a late hour at night, through the back door. That basically takes away the power of the special jurisdiction for peace and what was agreed upon to overcome the armed conflict.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has accused the United States of plotting a new attack against him and his government. Maduro said that U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton is in charge of an operation to assassinate him and lead a coup against his government. He said Venezuela has evidence that the Colombian government is facilitating the training of Colombian and Venezuelan paramilitaries. Maduro said his government wants dialogue and respect between his country and the United States.
Now, I come again to condemn that plot prepared from the White House to attack democracy in Venezuela, to assassinate me, and to impose a dictatorial government in Venezuela. It was John Bolton was assigned as the head of this plan to bring violence to Venezuela and to seek a foreign military intervention with a plan to assassinate Maduro and impose a transitional government council. So this plan of John Bolton's has another operational center, the Tolmeda Air Base in Colombia.
For his part, Colombian President Iván Duque has denied President Maduro's claims.
Colombia is under no circumstances planning nor thinking about any style action against any country in the region. We won't allow such doubts or accusations to be made. Those accusations must be rejected by all Colombians. And what should be made clear is that those who are exercising dictatorship against their citizens, generating significant migration flows, must respond to international justice.
A gunman in Palestine has killed 2 people and injured 2 others in the occupied West Bank. The shooting took place near the illegal Israeli settlement of Ofra in the central West Bank. According to Israeli forces, the gunman was shot by an armed passerby. Meanwhile, there are reports that the Israeli military has surrounded the city of Ramallah and closed all entry and exit points. So we now go live to Stefan Barbour, an independent journalist who is based in Ramallah, who witnessed the overnight shootings in the West Bank. Hello, Stefan. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us what's happening over there?
How are you doing?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, can you tell us what's happening over there? You witnessed the shooting.
Right now, the soldiers have entered the city. It's maybe 50 tanks came in. I'm in the center of Ramallah right now, and most of all the businesses are closed. There's been cellular attacks on taxi services, and they're supposed to come in for a home demolition into a refugee camp right now, in Alamari refugee camp today. The whole West Bank is on siege, especially north, the northern part of the West Bank.
And what is the situation of people there? We saw reports of a kid that yesterday he was shot by Israeli fire and then died due to this.
The situation now, the people feel hopeless. They feel they're in a resistant mode. That's why most of the businesses are closed in the honor of the 3 martyrs that were killed last night. It's an ongoing situation right now because, as you know, the West Bank is under occupation.
And do you see any people from Palestine trying to block the Israeli troops from moving into the West Bank?
Do I see any? Sorry, I couldn't hear that last part.
Any actions on Palestinian people trying to prevent Israeli troops from moving in?
Yes, I'm on my way to a clash right now. The soldiers have entered the northern part of the city, and from the Beit El entrance. I'll keep you updated, okay?
Take care.
I'll be sending out live tweets and video footage.
Yes, please
right
take
now.
care. We'll be back to you as soon as we have more. That was Stefan Barbour, an independent journalist from the West Bank. We'll come back to him as soon as we have more. In other stories, authorities in Bolivia have rejected the violence created by opposition parties and how the protests have been shown in media against President Morales. Let's find out more.
In the city of Santa Cruz, a student protest led to the attack of 3 state institutions. The most severe damages happened in the electoral court, where a fire was started. The country's opposition assures that these acts are started by government-backed intruders.
These actions seek to generate violence, and they come from the government, which plans to discredit these marches, which have always been peaceful.
Government Minister Carlos Romero has rejected these accusations and has called them an example of the opposition-led manipulation in social media and in the press. He cited the use of a picture of one of the violent protesters who, allegedly, had a Che Guevara tattoo on his shoulder.
They are using a citizen with an alleged tattoo of Che Guevara. Look, this is not Che Guevara. This is for sure Charles Manson. They have obviously modified the image with some retouching for social media.
The government minister blamed the violence of fascist groups that hire young felons to act with a covered face, calling this practice a cowardly act from the political opposition.
These are the same violent people. They are radical fascist groups, separatists, racists. These are people that make it difficult to live in Bolivia. They don't want to share their collective life with people of color or people with an indigenous last name.
The violent acts in Santa Cruz were rejected by institutions like the Ombudsman's Office, lawmakers, and social organizations that back the government.
We are in a state of emergency headed by the Bolivian working class. The rest of participating organizations are also in a state of emergency.
The opposition is now mobilizing against the candidature of President Evo Morales for next year's general elections. This, despite the fact that it was the Constitutional Court that allowed him to run over a year ago.
We now go to the UK. After surviving a crucial vote of no confidence, Prime Minister Theresa May is once again making an attempt at securing the help of the European Union for the Brexit plan. She is headed to Brussels to attend an EU summit and seek support for her deal, and in particular for the Irish backstop. The EU is not expected to renegotiate the deal, but will likely give some assurances on the backstop. And after the vote, the Prime Minister said she's pleased to have received the support of her colleagues. She also urged them to get on with the job of delivering Brexit.
This has been a long and challenging day, but at the end of it, I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues in tonight's ballot. Whilst I'm grateful for that support, a significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said. Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the vote that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
And we're back. A group of migrants decided to jump over the border fence in Tijuana on Wednesday, only to be detained by U.S. authorities. Frustrated migrants staying in shelters are taking the risk of jumping over the fence in the hope that their asylum claims can be processed quicker. Mexican officials confirmed that as many as 1,000 migrants have jumped over, despite knowing that they will be stopped.
How can I explain to him that we're not terrorists? Don't accuse us of things which we're not. We're workers. We're looking for employment. I call on United States President Donald Trump to investigate us. We have not all committed criminal acts in our countries. We're honest, humble people who want a better life.
We continue in Mexico, where millions of worshippers have visited the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. This annual pilgrimage marks the anniversary of the day in 1531, when the Virgin Mary is said to have appeared to an indigenous man, asking him to build a church in her honor. The event is considered to be significant in converting indigenous Mexicans to Catholicism.
Las investigaciones que coincidieron con varias fuentes y condujeron a la grave denuncia que hizo el presidente Nicolás Maduro, un plan que está en pleno desarrollo para asesinarlo.
Ha sido asignado el señor John Bolton nuevamente.
And let's go to another story. Pope Francis has released Chilean Cardinal Francisco Errázuriz from his duties at the Vatican after he was embroiled in sexual abuse scandals that are rocking the Catholic Church. Our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela, has more.
Errázuriz has been removed from his position in Pope Francis' circle of councillors. He has been accused in Chile by the survivors and victims of sexual abuse of covering up the crimes committed against them. They were victims of former priest Fernando, who was working at the church and sexually abused minors. They, who later denounced him to the bishop. However, Errazo decided not to investigate further and closed the investigation for this case. The case was up in the air until Pope Francis sent 2 people to investigate. Pope Francis has decided to accept the resignation of bishops involved in these cases and will now release Cardinal Errázuriz from his councillor duties. There is crisis in the Catholic Church in our country, and this is a step towards justice for these victims of sexual abuse inside the church.
That was Tiare Valenzuela from Chile. And in other news, an arrest warrant for the faith healer known as John of God has been issued in Brazil, following allegations of sexual abuse by over 200 women against him. João Teixeira de Faria, known as João de Deus, operates from a spiritual center in Abadiania, where he allegedly abused women seeking help. The first allegation was aired on TV on December 7, which was followed by a group of women coming forward. Faria jumped to fame when TV host Oprah Winfrey broadcasted a report on his psychic healing powers in 2013. The Commission for Human Rights in the Brazilian Senate is concerned about the future of the country once President-elect Jair Bolsonaro takes office. Let's find out more.
The Brazilian Senate's Human Rights Commission condemned arbitrary violations during the trial of former President Lula da Silva.
The imprisonment of Lula is a violation of human rights. He's a political prisoner because he's a former president of a country, and there was very little evidence. He was jailed in order to be kept away from the elections in Brazil, because he was in first place in all the polls. He could have even won in the first round of voting. It is an attack on Brazilian democracy and a serious violation of human rights.
Some of the worst violations have been defamation, improper exposure, the absence of evidence, and the lack of guarantees for a legal process. People did not just lose a president. They lost someone who pulled thousands of people out of extreme poverty.
According to experts, the decision to award Judge Sergio Moro, who helped Jair Lula, the Minister of Justice position in the next government demonstrates his imprisonment was in the political interest of the elite and is persecution of the left wing.
With Lula in this situation, with who he is and how important he is for Brazil, imagine what it will be like for us and the violence that we can expect from January onwards.
There are brutal violations denounced in Brazil and in the whole world, to the point that they were even denounced in the United Nations. Brazil's own government dismissed the direction of the UN with respect to Lula's candidacy. It was an arbitrary way to act, unjust, and political persecution of President Lula.
The Human Rights Commission also fears for the rights of workers once Bolsonaro takes office. The empowerment of the armed forces and harassment of the opposition is making people nervous.
A court in Ecuador has heard Julian Assange's appeal over new rules imposed on him in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. WikiLeaks founder Assange has undergone a series of medical tests in accordance with the new regulations. He also has to pay for his own phone bills and take care of his cat. The WikiLeaks founder took refuge in Ecuador's UK embassy in 2012, but his relationship with Ecuador has grown tense since the election of current president Lenín Moreno. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Keith Rowley has accused the country's opposition of partnering with Venezuelan opposition politicians in order to derail a major gas deal signed with Venezuela.
I'm aware, Madam Speaker, that members of this opposition in Trinidad and Tobago have been trying to get members of the opposition in Venezuela to oppose this matter. Correct. Madam Speaker, I make no further comment at this time. But Madam Speaker, after a year and a half of the successful conclusion of this international agreement, lo and behold, one individual from the Venezuelan opposition comes to Trinidad and Tobago to say that the agreement may not be honored.
We'll take one last break, but stay with us.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur. Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa has dismissed speculation that his government is in talks with the opposition to form a government of national unity. Addressing his party's Central Committee meeting, Mnangagwa said those who wish for a coalition government must dream on, because his party clearly won the elections and will rule for the next 5 years. Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki has arrived in the Somali capital of Mogadishu for his first visit to the country. The visit is yet another sign of rapidly improving relations between countries in the region. In July, Somalia and Eritrea had said they planned to establish diplomatic relations. Past Somali governments had accused Eritrea of supplying weapons to anti-government Islamist fighters. The United Nations Secretary General has told world leaders that failing to reach a consensus on climate change would be a suicide. Talking at the COP24 climate conference in Poland, he reminded everyone that the time to take action is running out fast.
The IPCC reports outline the catastrophic future if we do not act immediately. It also clearly states that the window of opportunity is closing. We no longer have the luxury of time. That is why we need to have our work here in Katowice finalized in less than 3 days. To waste this opportunity in Katowice would compromise our last best chance to stop runaway climate change. It would not only be immoral, it would be suicidal.
At least 9 people have been killed and 43 wounded during a train accident in the Turkish capital of Ankara. A high-speed train collided with another locomotive, which then crashed into an overpass. Rescue workers were at the scene trying to pull people out of the carriages amid metal and glass debris. The accident occurred as the high-speed train was traveling between Ankara and Konya. Protesters and police in Hungary came to a standoff following the approval of a reform to the labor laws proposed by the Prime Minister. The reform has been labeled as a slave law by critics who say it will allow an increase in overtime working hours without consulting unions. Opposition parties tried to disrupt the vote by blowing whistles and sirens. Let's now take a look at other stories making headlines around the world.
A fire has broken out at the building of the Electoral Commission in the Democratic Republic of Congo just 10 days before a crucial presidential election. According to witnesses, the fire broke out at around 2 a.m. Thursday. The cause of the fire has not yet been established.
That's when we called the relevant authorities who came to ask about the situation. So far, we don't really know the real cause of this fire.
A car bomb detonated in the city of Al-Bab in Syria has killed at least 2 people and left scores of others nursing serious injuries. The explosion happened outside a mosque in a city that has been under the control of the Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army since 2017. No one has claimed responsibility so far. French Health Minister Agnès Buzyn visited the hospital where the victims of Tuesday's terrorist attack are being treated. The attack in the heart of the city of Strasbourg, as the annual Christmas market was closing on Tuesday night, left at least 3 people dead and 13 injured. Police have since launched a massive manhunt for the suspect identified as Sheriff Shekat. His mother and father, as well as 2 brothers, were detained on Wednesday for questioning.
Unfortunately, we can report 2 deaths out of the 16 people who were involved and injured in this attack. 16 people were injured, 2 died. There are now 3 people who are in life-threatening condition. 5 are at stake. We will see in the coming hours and days if they can get out of this situation, but it is not certain.
With only 1 week to go before Madagascar's second round of presidential elections, candidates are engaging in last-minute outreach activities to try to win over undecided voters. The second round of elections will pit 2 former presidents, Marc Ravalomanana and Andry Rajoelina, against each other.
A group of Venezuelan migrants are putting their training in music to good use by entertaining people in their host countries. When Cesar Perez arrived in Buenos Aires 6 months ago, he joined the Latin Vox Machine, a group made up of young Venezuelan musicians. They were all trained in El Sistema, a program founded by Venezuelan music director José Antonio Abreu, who wanted to pull youngsters out of a life of crime and poverty. Latin Vox is now made up of over 100 musicians.
The Orchestra Latin Vox Machine is a means to an end, and that end is to demonstrate what an organized community is capable of. That is what Venezuelans in this country want, to integrate any other person that has left their country and integrate them into their orchestra, where they have a space where they can feel at home.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but there's another stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're also on social media, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.